Hi everyone, it's Jenny with Joey and Jenny's Little Yellow House, and you can find us on YouTube at Joey143Jenny. So today I'm actually going to start with some sewing of my Cathe Holden fabric, and I thought I would kind of do two things at one time, and that is I'm working on some of my crazy quilt process, practicing, I guess I should say, and so I've done some scraps with other fabric and did two different processes with that. They're both fine, but I think I prefer the way this one turns out. So anyways, I thought I would do some Cathe Holden fabric in the same way and just kind of show you my process. Now, this is self-taught, so it's not a tutorial in the sense that I'm an expert in any way, but I'll just show you how I do it. So if you've ever purchased quilt blocks, crazy quilt blocks at thrift stores or flea markets, you may notice on the back that they have maybe some newsprint, like from old newspapers or whatever, like little pieces of it. So I've done that myself. I've used newsprint. I've used just really thin paper. I don't have anything like that around, so I'm just using tissue paper today. So for this one, this particular square, is this the one? Yeah. I just took a piece of tissue paper this size, a little bit bigger than this size, and I used it. But for today, I'm going to use this square because I'm wanting to do the Cathe Holden in squares so that I can put them in my journal. So I'm hoping I don't rattle the camera too much. So I don't know if you've ever done this process before, but this is basically it. So what I've done is I have some strips here. I didn't cut these. These are just some strips that I snagged out of Cathe's leftovers. And again, like I said in a previous video, when I showcased her fabrics, I usually deal in small pieces, so these are perfect for what I do. But what I do is I will take a piece of fabric. Oh, this one's nice and long. Wowza. This is fun. Okay. I'll take a piece of fabric, and now you can do it any way you want. You can go across like this. I like to go diagonal. And what I'll do is I'll lay it over this corner. And basically what you're wanting to do is when you flip it over, you want to make sure that some of the fabric, there's enough fabric to go completely on the piece of paper. So just keep that in mind, that whenever you're putting fabric down, and I'll show you the process, but when you put the fabric down, you want to make sure it's completely going over the edges if you're wanting to have a full square, a full circle, a full whatever design that you've cut out to use. In the end, so we'll fill this whole thing up. In the end, we'll tear this paper away, and then you'll have that finished project. Now, one step that I'm not going to do while I'm filming, just because of time, is I'm not going to iron while I'm doing this, but I'll show you where you would iron and at what point you would iron, okay? So let's get started. I want to get started right away because I want to get as much done as possible. And I think what I'm going to do, now the very first one, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start with these green peas. I'm going to put those up there. Now, I don't want to necessarily, I think I'm going to cut it right here because I don't want to lose that household. Those are fun. So I'm going to be a little off, which is fine for a crazy quilt. Okay, so I'm going to try not to jiggle too much. I'm going to pull my handy dandy little sewing machine over. This is just a little Singer traditional sewing machine. It cost probably $79 or $100. I probably waited and got it on sale. Now, what did I just do with that little piece I had? Did I just put it over that? No? Okay. Now, this is par for course with me. I will cut something. Oh, there it is. And then I can't find it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over here to make sure that it covers the whole thing. Now I am going to use a teeny tiny little pin, and I do use these little pins so that it doesn't tear the paper. This tissue paper will probably get torn in the process, so just beware. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch across. So yeah, this little sewing machine I use for everything. If you're a seamstress, you will not be happy to know that I use it on paper as well. Now I am going to do a little back stitch just because, now come on little sewing machine. I'm going to do a little back stitch just because I'm going to be doing a lot with these papers. Hope you can hear over the sewing machine. When I mean I'm going to do a lot with these papers, I'm going to be moving them around a lot, and probably not very gentle as I haul them from place to place. You know, from the living room to the wherever I'm going to work on them. So I'm going to put a little stitch there. Okay, so see what we've done here is you can see I have a little overlay. Now I can go ahead and trim that now if I want, but I'm going to wait for a minute. I want to try to get as much sewing done as possible so I'm not bothering your ear the whole time. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to try not to think too hard. And I'm just going to grab another piece of Cathe's fabric. Now this one, I'm going to, you know, you want to elongate it because when it comes down, you want it to be able to go across your paper. So do that in a measurement first. Check and see, is that going to go from side to side of my paper? So then what I'm going to do is, because it does, I'm going to flip it up like this. Again, I think I'm going to use a little pin just to keep it in place. It does get a little squirrely with this paper sometimes. And then I'm just going to sew that. I'm going to go out here where it is. And you can use whatever seam allowance you want. I use approximately 1/4 to 1/8. It doesn't really matter. I'm hoping this doesn't jiggle you too much. I'm holding the camera and sewing at the same time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to see if I can pause this and then do a few more. And then, okay, here's a mistake I made right off the bat. So I'll take this one off. I needed to put this piece, let's see if you can see this. Okay, here's my first line. I needed to put this piece over that first line. So I am going to cut that off. And I'm going to do that again. Now I can fix this part that I've cut off in a little bit. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. But let's go ahead and get this done again. And then I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to try to pause. We'll see how good that does. Let's see. Okay, this needs to go up here, but it needs to go above that line. Okay, I may be making a complete disaster of this, but we'll see. Okay. Okay, so our seam allowance is going to be above that line. All right, I'm going to do another one just so you see what I'm talking about. All right, here, let me put this back stitch in. And now let me sew and hold this camera because I don't want it to jiggle the whole time. All right. Okay, now hopefully this is going to be a little bit better. Oh boy. This is what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily a tutorial. Okay. All right. It's a trial and error with Jenny. Okay, so now see, I'm going to pull that down. Now that seam allowance is caught inside there. Now when you turn it over, whoops, I'm going to hit you anyways. Okay, now when you turn it over, you can see that you're within your line. I am going to trim this a little bit, kind of keep it to where, so that you can kind of see the process and what's what's happening. I know, I'm going to keep those. I know, but it's what's going to happen. I'm going to keep them. I am leaving a little bit of, I'll trim this up really, really good later, but I am leaving a little bit of an allowance here. Okay, so now this is where I would iron, and I would iron this down, okay? But I'm just gonna do this finger iron here, and I'm gonna do another row. And then I'm gonna see about, can she pause the video and come back? Well, we'll see what happens. Okay. All right, now this is so pretty. Look at that. Isn't this adorable? Okay, look at these teeny tiny little birds with their nest and eggs. Oh my gosh. All right, so again, now I'm going to come up here. Want to make sure that this is going to be long enough to go across. See that? It goes across here, and it's going to go across here. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that up. All right, and I'm going to put a little pin just for my own sake. Now, you did see in my example, I'll show it to you here. I didn't just use different fabrics to go across. So what I did was I sewed fabrics together and made a strip. Okay, so you could definitely do that, and that's a lot of fun. What's great about it is, like you can see here, are two tiny little pieces. And this little square here, or this little part of the strip, is actually two pieces, and same here. So, I mean, you can use, all kinds of little scraps. So you put all your scraps together, you make your strip, or that's how I do it. And then you're ready to go. So, okay, let's do this one. I'll put a little back stitch. And then I'm going to try to pause and move along the process a little bit so that you can see a little bit more. Okay. All right, so I'm going to try to pause, and I will be back in just a little bit. Okay, so I'm back. I did a couple of rows, and now what I'm do is hopefully the last row, if I measured right, and then I'll show you what my plan is if all goes well. So let's do this one. Okay, all right. Let's make sure before I move the machine out of the way that it does indeed cover, and it does. Okay, awesome. So let's move this out of the way, and okay, let's take a look and see what we have here. Okay, one thing I wanted to also tell you is when you're doing this, you have to really make sure you have the orientation going right, in the correct direction. I want to make sure I got all my pins. Nope. Unless, with the crazy quilt, all of that, you can it's kind of like junk journaling. Everything goes out the window. So like this right here is upside down. But I think that's going to be okay because all of this is just going to be kind of wonky. Okay, so you can see here that I don't have, it cut. So let's cut it. I did bring my pinking shears. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go along the lines of this tissue paper. Okay, so this shouldn't take but a minute. Might literally take a minute. Also, look at these fun scraps that I'm going to have. that I think I'm going to pin down in the corner here. If you haven't already cut your strings, this helps to cut those too when you go around here like this. Now, you could also, if let's say you were using this as a square, an actual big square, you know, as it is now, you could baste around the full edge. You know, to keep all the pieces nice and just workable if you're making a big quilt or something. I'm not, you know, making a big quilt. I'm just using this to put in my journal. And I'll probably stitch on it, like maybe embroider or something. Okay. Move this up here and just get that nice. Newsprint, one of the reasons that newsprint does work really well is because you can see it. So I don't have a newspaper, I would have used that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pins out, and I think that's the only one. And then what I want to do is I want to cut it into 4 squares. I don't know what I'm going to do with all of the squares, but I know that for sure I want at least one in the journal. So I'm going to cut it like this. You could easily use this method for hot pads. And, you know, again, a quilt, you could take these pieces and just flip them and sew them back together, and then you'd have even crazier quilting. You can make coasters. You could, you know, whatever. You add a patch to your jeans, make a pocket, whatever. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so now we have these 4. Let's get some of these out of the way. Again, you know, you would definitely want to iron. See, you have, you know, these 4 squares now. And you can just move them however you want, whatever looks best for you, whatever you think. If you wanted to sew them back together, you know, you could. Like that makes it even crazier, right? But what I'm going to do is probably just use them individually. Okay, so then the next thing is you just you tear, you know, you just gently tear off your tissue or your newsprint. I mean, you could use like your tearaway webbing or whatever it's called. I think that's just an expense. This is actually reused tissue from probably Christmas or something. And I just saved it. I often will iron it just to kind of make it a little bit more usable, you know, in my crafts. So I just find if you just put your finger through the channel, you can just rip it off nicely. Like that. And it is quite fun, you know. If, let's say you get all of them stitched. Okay, this is the one that I made that mistake on, where I stitched it a little too early. So what I'll do here, I told you I'd show you how I'd fix it. Remember, I stitched it too early, so what I'll do is I'll cut back to just the appropriate seam. So I'll take this, cut that one back. So see, now we're back to none the wiser on that. Okay, and then I have this little bit to get rid of, this little paper, because I sewed it in. So anyways, yeah, this paper, taking the paper off, you could easily save all that for TV, you know, your television watching or in the car or whatever while you're waiting for somebody. Also, if you do get it a little wet, it's a little easier to take this tissue paper off, but I'll get it with just some tweezers here in a little bit. I don't want to use the time for that, but I like how when you do cut them apart, how fun the corners are. You know, what's going to be at the corners can be kind of fun. How you, it's kind of it's just kind of a surprise sometimes, you know, what happens, especially if you're not super particular on how you're doing it, because Crazy Quilt is all about using your scraps, and then part of Crazy Quilting is using your stitching abilities. So even if it's just a running stitch or it's a slow stitch, blanket stitch, what have you, it's about using that. You could also just use fancy stitching on your sewing machine, like this little sewing machine that I use. It has a kind of looks like little bird hops, and I think it looks super sweet. And what you could do is you would just stitch across, you know, you would just stitch across your seams, or like with this Cathe's fabric, how I used her flat lay, you could stitch in between, you know, each of the pictures that she's done. So there we have it. So that we're moving right along on the Cathe Holden journal, aren't we? And so I'll work on these, and I'll give you an update and show you what I do with them. So I appreciate you all hanging out with me. If this is the first time that you've used this particular process, I'd love to hear what you think about it and if you'll use it. It's a lot of fun. All right, everybody, take care, and blessings to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.